In this episode, we move deeper into the part of cybersecurity where defenders stop thinking only about alerts that have already appeared and start thinking much more deliberately about where hidden problems are most likely to exist. Threat hunting focus areas matter because no team has unlimited time, unlimited staff, or unlimited visibility. So hunters need to concentrate on the places, behaviors, and conditions that are most likely to reveal meaningful attacker activity. Active defense matters for a similar reason, because strong security work is not only about waiting for trouble and then reacting after damage has already begun. It is also about taking smart, controlled, and lawful actions inside your own environment to improve visibility, slow attackers down, and create more chances to detect what they are doing. For someone studying CompTIA CySA+, this topic helps connect many earlier ideas into one practical mindset. Good defenders use threat intelligence, system knowledge, user behavior, and business context to decide where to hunt, and then they support that hunting with defensive measures that make the environment harder to abuse and easier to observe. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A good starting point is remembering that threat hunting is not just broad curiosity spread across the entire environment at once. It is a focused search for suspicious behavior based on a reasoned belief that certain parts of the environment deserve closer attention. That reasoned belief may come from recent threat intelligence, a known weakness in the organization, an unusual trend in alerts, or a concern that an important area of the business is especially attractive to attackers. Without focus areas, hunting can become inefficient and exhausting because analysts end up looking everywhere and learning very little. With focus areas, the hunt becomes much more purposeful. The team asks where an attacker would most likely gain value, where existing controls may be weakest, where visibility is strongest or weakest, and where abnormal behavior would matter most to the business. This is one of the biggest mindset shifts for new learners. Hunting is not about endless searching. It is about choosing the most meaningful ground and then examining that ground carefully enough to notice what routine monitoring may have missed. One of the most common and important focus areas is identity, because many attacks succeed not by breaking technology in a dramatic way, but by abusing usernames, passwords, session tokens, or other forms of trusted access. If an attacker can act as a real user, much of their activity may look normal at first glance, which makes identity a rich area for hunting. Analysts may look for unusual login patterns, unexpected access times, repeated failed authentication followed by success, privilege use that does not fit a person's normal role, or access to applications and data that do not match usual behavior. Identity matters so much because it often sits at the center of the modern environment. People use it to reach email, cloud services, internal platforms, file repositories, and administrative tools. That means a compromise involving identity can open many doors at once. A threat hunter who understands this will often start by asking whether trusted access is being used in untrusted ways, because that question frequently leads to some of the most valuable discoveries in real security operations. Endpoints are another major focus area because they are where people work, where files are opened, where malicious code often lands first, and where many early signs of compromise can appear. A workstation or laptop may show unusual processes, suspicious parent-child process relationships, unexpected persistence behavior, or rare tools being used in strange ways. A server may reveal odd service changes, new scheduled activity, unexpected scripts, or administrative behavior that does not fit its normal role. The reason endpoints make such good hunting territory is that attackers usually need to do something on a system to gain traction, collect information, or move deeper into the environment. Even when attackers try to be quiet, the endpoint often records traces of that activity. Hunters focus here not because every odd process is malicious, but because endpoints often preserve the small behavioral clues that connect early access, execution, persistence, and misuse of legitimate tools. When defenders understand normal system behavior well enough, endpoints become one of the richest places to search for the difference between ordinary activity and the beginning of something dangerous. Network activity is also a classic hunting focus area, though beginners should think of it less as a wall around the organization and more as the movement of communication between systems, services, and outside destinations. A hunter examining network behavior may look for unusual outbound traffic, systems talking to destinations they rarely contact, strange timing patterns, unexpected internal connections between unrelated systems, or communication that seems inconsistent with a device's business purpose. The value of network-focused hunting is that attackers often need to move data, contact command systems, or explore internal paths after initial access. Even when the malicious content is not obvious, the pattern of communication can still stand out. A finance workstation suddenly making connections unlike those of similar systems may deserve attention. A server speaking to destinations that do not fit its role may deserve attention. Network hunting becomes especially powerful when combined with endpoint and identity context, because then the analyst can connect who acted, on what system, and where that activity reached, turning isolated signals into a more complete story. Email and messaging environments are another important focus area because they remain common entry points for phishing, social engineering, credential theft, malware delivery, and business email compromise. A hunter concentrating here may look for suspicious sender patterns, forwarding rules that appear unexpectedly, login activity that follows user interaction with a lure, messages targeting specific departments, or account behaviors that suggest mailbox misuse after compromise. The reason this area matters so much is that attackers often prefer paths that exploit trust and human routine rather than forcing their way through hard technical barriers. Email is deeply tied to identity, access recovery, executive communication, vendor interaction, and document sharing, which means compromise in this space can lead quickly to broader harm. Hunting in this area helps defenders catch not only the obvious malicious message, but the quieter signs that follow it, such as a compromised user quietly changing settings, reaching into shared resources, or using a trusted account to target others internally. For many organizations, this is one of the most realistic places to start a hunt because the attack surface is both large and heavily used. Privilege use is another high-value hunting focus area because attackers often seek elevated access even when they do not begin with it. Once someone can act with greater authority, the path to broader control, data access, or defensive evasion becomes much easier. Threat hunters therefore pay close attention to unexpected administrative actions, role changes that seem unusual, credentials being used across systems in ways that do not fit established duties, or powerful accounts appearing in places they do not normally operate. The importance of this focus area is not just technical, it is strategic. Privilege often changes the scale of possible harm. So even a small anomaly involving a high-value account may matter more than a louder but less significant event elsewhere. A new learner should remember that attackers do not always begin with the keys to the kingdom. They frequently work toward those keys step by step. Hunting around privilege helps defenders notice whether that climb is underway and whether normal business access boundaries are being crossed in ways that deserve immediate investigation. Another powerful focus area is lateral movement, which refers to how attackers shift from one system, account, or area of the environment to another after gaining a foothold. This matters because a compromise that begins on one user device may become a much more serious incident if the attacker starts reaching file shares, servers, identity systems, or management tools. A threat hunter looking for lateral movement may examine access patterns that seem inconsistent with established relationships, unusual remote access behavior, repeated authentication attempts across systems, or sudden connections between devices that do not typically interact. The goal is to see whether someone is probing, expanding, or positioning themselves for a broader impact. Lateral movement hunting is especially useful because it often reveals the difference between a small, isolated compromise and an actor who is actively trying to deepen control. It also helps analysts think in terms of attacker progression rather than single events. Instead of asking only whether something bad happened on one system, the hunter asks whether that system has become the starting point for a wider campaign inside the environment. Data access and exfiltration deserve attention as a separate focus area because attackers often care less about the system itself than about what they can reach through it. Sensitive data, Intellectual property, customer records, financial material, research content, and operational documents all represent value, whether for theft, extortion, espionage, or disruption. A hunter working in this area may look for unusual file access, patterns of collection that do not match normal job functions, spikes in compression or staging behavior, large transfers that appear at odd times, or data moving through paths that are technically allowed but contextually suspicious. This kind of hunting requires a strong understanding of where important data lives and what normal access looks like. Without that business context, unusual movement may be missed or misread. For CySA Plus learners, this is a useful reminder that threat hunting is not just a technical exercise. It depends on knowing what the organization values most, and then asking whether anyone is interacting with that value in ways that do not make business sense. Threat hunting focus areas should also be shaped by threat intelligence and by what is happening in the wider environment. If a sector is experiencing repeated credential theft campaigns, identity and email may deserve immediate attention. If certain remote access services are being abused across comparable organizations, then those services become natural hunting territory. If current reporting shows attackers are using legitimate administrative tools after compromise, hunters may concentrate more on privilege use, system management activity, and subtle execution patterns instead of looking only for malware. This connection matters because hunting is strongest when it is informed by realistic adversary behavior rather than by abstract fear. Threat intelligence gives hunters hypotheses that are grounded in observed tactics, techniques, and procedures. That does not mean the team should chase every headline, but it does mean outside knowledge can help decide which focus areas are most urgent this month, this week, or even this day. Mature hunting programs constantly connect local environment knowledge with external threat awareness, so the search remains relevant and operationally useful. Active defense begins where this hunting mindset becomes more proactive and more deliberate about shaping the environment itself. Active defense does not mean striking back at attackers outside your organization, and it does not mean launching retaliatory hacks or crossing legal boundaries. In a responsible security context, active defense means taking controlled actions within your own systems and networks to improve detection, slow down attackers, guide them toward observable behavior, and reduce the advantage they gain from stealth. This can include stronger monitoring, more deliberate segmentation, tighter identity controls, improved enrichment of suspicious events, and sometimes the use of deception techniques such as decoy accounts, decoy services, or controlled false paths that help reveal unauthorized activity. The point is to become a harder and more observable target rather than a passive one. This is an important distinction for beginners because the phrase active defense can sound aggressive. In reality, the mature defensive meaning is about intelligent preparation, controlled friction, and better visibility inside the defender's own lawful environment. One of the clearest examples of active defense is deception, which gives defenders a way to create signals that are quiet during normal operations but highly meaningful when touched by the wrong person. A decoy administrative account, a false service, or a controlled file share with no legitimate business purpose can become a very strong warning sign if an attacker interacts with it. The value of deception is that it reduces ambiguity. In busy environments, many alerts are hard to interpret because real users and systems generate so much normal activity. A well-designed deceptive element can stand out precisely because no one should be using it under ordinary conditions. That makes it a useful support for threat hunting and for alerting alike. At the same time, it must be designed thoughtfully so it does not disrupt operations, confuse employees, or create management problems. The larger lesson is that active defense works best when it improves signal quality. Instead of only collecting more data, the defender shapes the environment so malicious exploration becomes easier to spot and harder to hide inside routine activity. Another important form of active defense is controlled containment and friction. Not every defensive action must wait until a full incident is declared. Organizations can place stronger checks around sensitive actions, require additional verification for risky access patterns, limit how far identities can move, and reduce unnecessary trust relationships that attackers often exploit after initial access. These measures do not guarantee prevention, but they increase the likelihood that attacker activity will trigger visible events or stall long enough for defenders to respond. A hunter benefits directly from this because friction points create evidence. If an attacker tries to move laterally and encounters segmented systems, tighter access rules, or privileged workflows that require extra validation, the activity may produce clearer traces than it would in an open and trusting environment. This is one of the best ways to understand the relationship between hunting and active defense. Hunting searches for suspicious patterns, while active defense helps create an environment where those patterns are more likely to appear clearly instead of blending into unrestricted movement and overly broad access. There are also important limits and cautions that new learners should understand. Threat hunting can waste time if focus areas are chosen poorly, if the team lacks the visibility to answer the hunting question, or if every hunt is based on vague suspicion rather than evidence and context. Active defense can cause confusion if it is poorly governed, too disruptive, or misunderstood as permission to act outside the organization's boundaries. Defenders must stay disciplined about legality, business impact, privacy, and operational clarity. A decoy that no one documents properly can confuse internal teams. A control added in the name of active defense can frustrate business operations if it is not aligned to real risk. A hunt built around the wrong assumptions can produce noise instead of insight. This is why mature programs treat both hunting and active defense as planned disciplines, not as dramatic gestures. They choose focus areas based on risk, visibility, and business value, and they deploy active defensive measures in ways that improve understanding and resilience without creating unnecessary harm. What ties the whole topic together is the idea that good defenders do not simply ask whether something bad has already happened. They ask where bad activity is most likely to emerge, what behaviors would reveal it, and what changes in the environment would make it easier to detect and harder to carry out. Threat hunting focus areas give structure to that search by concentrating attention on identity, endpoints, networks, messaging, privilege, lateral movement, and data access where attacker activity often becomes visible in meaningful ways. Active defense strengthens the effort by improving observation, creating friction, and sometimes using controlled deception to produce stronger signals. For someone preparing for CySA+, the biggest lesson is that mature defense is both analytical and proactive. It is analytical because hunters need evidence, context, and good hypotheses. It is proactive because defenders can shape their own environment to produce better visibility and reduce the attacker's ability to move quietly. By the end of this discussion, threat hunting focus areas and active defense should feel like two parts of the same broader defensive mindset. Focus areas help analysts decide where to look first and why those places matter, while active defense helps the organization become a place where malicious behavior is easier to notice and harder to carry out without friction. Neither idea depends on dramatic offensive action, and neither works well without planning, visibility, and sound judgment. The strongest defenders combine business knowledge, threat intelligence, identity awareness, system understanding, and controlled defensive measures to search more intelligently and respond more effectively. For a beginner, that is an important step forward in thinking like a real analyst. Security is not only about reacting when a tool declares a problem. It is also about knowing where compromise is most likely to appear, building an environment that exposes it more clearly, and staying disciplined enough to separate meaningful signals from ordinary noise.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.